Hi patrons, for this week's Patreon Extras, I thought I would dive into a little bit more some of the things that are possible if you're working with more sort of rhythmic tension, because I mean that's a little bit where I'm starting with the main lesson on YouTube, but it's also just something that's not talked about as much, I guess, and also somehow is something that is maybe harder to teach and also harder to get into. But at the same time, I think is really a huge part of, especially modern jazz, but actually also just a huge part of jazz in general. So what I've done here is that I've taken just basic 2-5-1s, just still in C major, the same as in the main lesson, but then now I'm going over some lines that are creating some other kinds of rhythmic tension. And of course, the examples are not long enough to really show how that works, which is kind of similar to what is happening in the main lesson. Because a 2-5-1, like you kind of need a form to understand how this kind of tension and release works. It's a longer thing than just in a 2-5-1 lick. But at the same time, these are some examples of how you might execute it. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what you can work on. And these are actually things that are quite essential, I think, to start working on it as soon as you start feeling comfortable with just improvising on the changes and playing the songs. Then you want to have some different sort of rhythmical vocabulary that you can use as well. So the three things I'm going to cover are going to be double time, just to give you an idea about how I deal with that and how I work with it. And this tempo is still fairly friendly for that. And then I'm also going to talk about another thing that I'm using really a lot. You've heard me use it a million times, which is triplet rhythms. It's a kind of course, with the 2-5-1 lick, it's a bit condensed. And then finally, also just some groupings and some cross rhythms. So the first line sounds like this. Okay, so here I think it's quite clear that the thing you need to check out a little bit, of course you need to be able to play what would be 16 notes in this tempo. So that is in itself, of course, a little bit difficult, but you also need to have a technique and have a way of executing these lines that's going to make that possible. And that's something that maybe is sometimes a little bit overlooked, and it's a little bit difficult to explain what I mean by it, but I've tried to mark it in now the way that I use it here. And I hope I get it right, actually, because I don't really know how I play things very often. But what I'm doing here is that I'm sometimes just adding some kind of legato just to make it easier for my right hand. And that way try to execute it. So the first line, this slide is in one of them. Another pull off here from the C to the A. And then again, another pull off from the E to D. And that's a really comfortable way to get that fifth interval in there. Because it's easy to play scale lines if you want to play fast. That's the easiest thing to play technically. But at the same time, they get really boring really fast, and you want to have you're going to play some scale lines also just because you're going to run out of range if you play anything else for any kind of time. But at the same time, you do want to have some other melodies in there. And I think that's a good example. It's kind of similar to what I talked about Schofield does in one of the videos on his, actually the video on his solo on Milestones that I did like half a year ago, I think. So we have that, and then it's just a scale one. Then it moves to the, and that's of course just alternate picking. So then it moves to the alto dominant. Again, starting with a pull off just to buy myself some time. And then here, sort of, I guess that's kind of easy to do, to get up to the alternate picking all the way up to the high, skipping up to the high E flat here. Then a sweep, another sweep, and then resolving to the G on the C major 7. So in this fairly short amount of time, I'm already using different kinds of legato. I'm using slides, and I'm using some pull-offs, and I'm also adding some economy or sweep picking to be able to execute this. And you kind of need to have all these techniques and get them to come together if you want to play like lines like this. And I think for me, this was really something that I practiced just as soon as you can play a tempo kind of comfortably. So that's the first thing you want to be able to do. So if you're playing this, this means that I think it's 108 track that I'm playing on. So that means that I should be fairly comfortable already just playing 8-note solo lines in 216, because that's going to be the same kind of tempo, and that's the tempo I need to be able to execute if I want to play these double time lines. And that's important to check out. And then also just this idea of having solutions where you give yourself some time by the technical choices that you make. And I guess you're just sort of trying to play longer lines and continuous 8-note lines in higher tempos. So where it still feels comfortable, so high that it's still comfortable, is where you're gonna build that skill. I think that's the main thing, where you start finding these options, because I never really thought too much about what I'm doing with that. That's really just something that sort of evolved into my playing. And you will see me use them again and again. These are all over my playing, all these different techniques. So the first example here was really long, and there's a lot of things to talk about. How do you work on this? The second is actually something I use maybe even more than double time, because that's triplet rhythms, and I use that really a lot. I really like the sound of it, which is also, it fits with that I like Herbie Hancock's playing, for instance. When he plays medium, he plays a ton of triplet patterns. And here there are a few different things happening that are all sort of useful things to be able to do with triplets that you want to check out. The first one is to sort of turn around the swing. So what I'm doing here is that instead of playing, I'm playing. So that means that I'm playing the first note short and the second note long in the swing instead of the other way around. So then we get a quarter note triplet pattern where I'm adding 2 8-note triplets at the end. So that's another pattern that's very useful to have in your playing, and you can actually easily mix in with your swing 8th notes also, and just have some slightly different sounds in there. So then it moves into a group of 4 8th notes, so 4 8th note triplets. And the way I've done that is that I'm playing 3 notes and then the last one is long. And that's just to keep it really clear. And then resolving to the 5th of C major 7. This final example is the one that's by far the easiest to execute and to play, especially in this tempo. But it's also one that's kind of tricky to do for longer periods of time. And it very often is something that sounds better if you can do it a little bit longer. You will hear this kind of rhythm all the time with Wes Montgomery. He has a lot of places where he uses patterns like this. And actually that goes for pretty much anybody. They will use shorter parts of these phrases. Parker does it as well. But you will also find that people will sometimes do this for longer periods of time, and actually Wes does it once in a while as well. So the concept here is just that I'm sort of trying to pretend that I'm playing that the 8th notes of the swing feel are triplets, and then I'm just playing sort of a swing triplet feel. So you can also hear that if I'm playing this without accompaniment, then that's kind of the feeling that it's giving the melody. But then it sounds different on top of the rhythm, because that's not the tempo we're in another tempo. And that's the effect that you want to have. And this way of just playing is just a very useful way to start working with this. Another example that you may know, because I've talked about it as an easy example of a lesson, of a standard, is Pent Up House. That also has this, which is that rhythm as well. It's just a simple version of it. So those are the kind of things that you can check out to get used to playing like this. So those are kind of other ways to create some rhythmical tension. They're just examples of that, and I hope you can use it for something. When this goes up, then I'm actually in LA running around. So I'm shooting this ahead of time, because otherwise I don't know if I can upload anything when I'm over there. So I need to do this earlier. But I hope you can use it for something. And of course, if you have any questions, then those I can probably answer. So don't be afraid to ask. And for the rest, thank you for the support, and until next week.